Biden era has come to a close.
Yes.
I won't miss him. I won't miss his wife and his drug addict son and that whole collection of grifters. And I certainly won't miss all those bizarre people in his cabinet. I can't tell what gender they are. And, it was good riddance. At the same time, we're beginning the era of a new freak show, a freak show we've seen before. Okay. And one of the first things I want to note is that the Hamburglar showed up to the inauguration because at least at first that's who I thought it was. And then I realized it was Melania, or Melanoma, as I like to call her, with that ridiculous hat she had.
I don't think it was a ridiculous hat. I think she would look stunning, if I might say so. But I don't. And that's going to start another fashion thing, of course.
That hat?
Yes.
I don't really know what kind of trend that would be other than to be looking like a very severe Hamburglar. And it's ironic that she's a McDonald's character because we know how he likes to eat McDonald's. But okay, so this whole freak show started. It was supposed to be outside, but of course, these MAGA Republicans, they're also manly. They couldn't handle a little cold, and so they decided to have it inside, like the pussies that they are. And he's surrounded by all those tech giants who are kissing his ass so they won't get regulated. It's so obvious. And I thought, I don't even know which one was more repulsive as they kissed his ass. Probably Mark Zuckerberg with his new afro look. It's ridiculous. He was talking online about his masculinity or, reviving masculinity.
Does judo or karate or one of those things.
Yeah.
I wouldn't.
He does like the fighting stuff, but maybe he does and he pays some trainer $300 an hour to make him tough. But some guy who works on rhythms all day is not someone who I'm going to get intimidated by in an alley. Now, some of those illegal immigrants that Biden let into the country who have criminal records, that's a different story. Now, we would think that if Trump was to give a speech on his inauguration, he has completely destroyed the left wing, those enemies. This should be a moment of glory for him. Instead, his speech was not magnanimous as it should have been. It was not melodious as you would hope it would be, he is no Ronald Reagan. And may I say, I miss Ron and Nancy more every day. They brought glamour and they brought excitement and optimism to the country and to the White House. These people, it's like a clown show. Now, here's what he said in his speech. My recent election is a mandate to completely and totally reverse a horrible betrayal and all of these many betrayals that have taken place and to give the people back their faith, their wealth, their democracy, and indeed their freedom. Now, he says all of this. It's so harsh and it's so not needed. Biden and Kamala was sitting there stone-faced. It was kind of funny. Okay, that part, it was funny, but it was a ridiculous speech. And he's a ridiculous...
It's not the way you should do things.
No.
Sorry.
No. In his speech and following his speech, he went into a number of executive orders. He's throwing them out there the way he's downing McDonald's French fries. So first of all, he declared a national emergency at the border. He's deploying troops. He's reinstated the Remain in Mexico policy, and he ended birthright citizenship, which is a constitutional right. And as you just noted before you got here, a judge has already put it on hold because it's in the Constitution.
And he said the remarks that I just saw briefly says, how did the lawyers ever let this thing go through? It's one of the most foolish things he's ever read. Well, this is what the judge was saying. And anyway,
the thing is, when you do stuff like this, you undermine the stuff that the people wanted him to do. And then he withdrew from the Paris Climate Agreement and the World Health Organization. Frankly, I don't know if I'm too upset about that because the World Health Organization is a institution that got involved in the whole Fauciism of the world. And Dr. Fauci is one of the most repulsive men who's ever been in the public health. And the World Health Organization is not a trustworthy ally. And so I don't know if I have a problem with that. And then he ended all of DEI offices throughout the federal government, and he put all of the employees on administrative leave.
With pay.
With pay. So it's going to cost us money for these people to sit on their ass and spew the grievance machine. I mean, I will say this whole DEI thing was already going by the wayside in corporate America. It's not, I mean, the problem with it is it's their idea of what diversity should be like, imposing it on everyone else and trying to give us lectures about our white privilege and the like. I don't think I need that from a bunch of people who are barely educated. He also, in his speech and in his executive order, he declared that as federal policy now only recognizes two genders, which, I mean, it's like, why would you even put that in the speech? I mean, sure, all this trans stuff went way too far, and the trans activists are out of control, and they undermine their interests by attacking legitimate statements made by people like J.K. Rowling. But for him to put that in a speech, I think was petty. But he's also now on your U.S. passport. There's no longer an X, Stu. So I hate to break it to you. You're going to have to say you're either male or female or you're screwed on your passport.
What do I do? I
don't know. I don't know. What is Bruce Jenner going to do? That's what I want to know.
He's got to carry a copy of that Wheaties box just to talk about the old days.
You mean back when he was male?
Yes, when he was the decathlon champion.
I didn't see him at the inauguration, though. I'm surprised he wasn't there.
Maybe he was there, but he was wearing something.
Maybe he was wearing one of those hats. But, I mean...
I didn't know he was part of that group, that clan.
He's a Republican, and he's a Trump supporter.
Is he? I don't know if he gets that kind of attention.
No, well, I don't think Caitlyn has the same kind of wealth as Jeff Bezos, and his wife was flashing her bra. Like... Why? There was only one big, huge gold-digging prostitute at that inauguration, and her name was Melania. Let's face it. You don't even come close. And we also, as Trump's rolling his way into town in kind of a juggernaut and undoing everything Biden did, which I don't know if that's such a bad thing because Biden was that bad. Rubio was approved by the Senate.
I have to say... Of all,
yeah, he
was solid. I watched some of the C-SPAN stuff. I happened to tune in on it. He was so strong, and he was so much different than I remember when he was running for the presidency. He wasn't. I don't want to say capable.
No, he diminished himself by getting in the gutter with Trump,
and it wasn't. He wasn't as polished as he is now. He spoke effectively and strongly on a range of issues. Very impressive, I thought.
Well, he's a well-educated man. I think he went to Harvard Law School or whatever.
No.
And he's a Cuban from Miami or Florida. I've never had a problem with him.
I just think he's stronger than I ever remembered. And I can see why it was an easy one.
He's matured also.
Yeah.
He's older.
Yes.
I mean, he's a serious person. On the other hand, Pete Hegseth had his hearings where the issues of his adultery, sexual abuse of women, excessive drinking, and total lack of experience in national defense came up.
He lacks any credentials.
He really does, but in the course of those hearings, he really didn't make any major gaffes, and he was rather smooth in answering the questions.
I didn't see it quite that way.
He
didn't answer the questions.
No, he didn't, but that's the whole point, Stu. He kind of sailed through. They didn't really catch him up on anything. And I think what really helped him, frankly, was the questioning by some of the leading Democrats with, Elizabeth Warren, who doesn't have any credibility. She's not a Native American. All she does is a screech and whine. Gillibrand, who looks like a Skeletor now, and she started off about all her feminism stuff. No one cares what she has to say. And then even most shockingly was Senator Kaine, who was Hillary's VP candidate. And he went after him about his sexual abuse, excessive drinking, and all this other stuff. And, but what I find ironic is the Democrats seem so upset about all of these, personal issues, yet I don't think that any of these Democrats, if they were in the Senate, would have voted to impeach Bill Clinton and he was a sexual abuser of women. I don't know if he abused alcohol. There's no evidence of that. And I don't know of any Democrat who ever condemned the lion of the Senate, Senator Ted Kennedy, who drank excessively, was an alcoholic, and was
That's problem at Chappaquiddy.
Right. Well, I was going to say he abused a lot of women sexually, including his wife, who he cheated on and degraded, and she has serious mental health issues. He treated her terribly. And also, as you noted, he murdered a woman. So the Democrats went down the wrong path. They should have been focusing on Hegseth's lack of experience, and it's just that he's a wingnut. And now he went through the committee approved his nomination on a 14-13 vote or something like that. And afterwards, Senator Reid from Rhode Island was floating an affidavit from his sister-in-law about how his second wife was abused by him or that was afraid of him. And then the second wife has denied it. And apparently this woman is a liberal Democrat. So the Democrats, they cannot seem to get their act together because they're not credible when it comes to talking about the abuse of women because they support abusers. Number two, Senator Ernst announced her support, and apparently they just had a test vote in the Senate, and he won 51-49. So this is going to be a defense secretary. So at the end of the day, I see Trump rolling through rather aggressively. Where it's all going to lead, I don't know. I personally will not be wearing a hat. I am happy to see the DEI. I'm happy to see the immigration raids. I'm happy to see all these liberals crying. It's fun. I don't think we should be picking on Carrie Underwood just because she performed the Star-Spangled Banner at the inauguration. Big deal. Leave the poor girl alone. Although I have to say she's no Whitney Houston whatsoever. And that performance was not to my liking. But she's pretty. I'll give her that. But this is a bunch of nonsense already, but it's not as crazy as it was the first time. It's a little less chaotic, a little more organized. I don't have high aspirations. And as an overall matter, though, I hate to say this, a lot of the stuff he's doing makes sense.
I agree with some of the things he's doing.
Not all
into that now.
Yeah, but there's something he did that was just unacceptable.
Well, can I add on to that with some, just talk about those things, those, what do we call them, acts of clemency. About 1,600 people, in my view, who helped disrupt the peaceful transition of power, which I think is the very essence of democracy. They were either pardoned or had their sentences commuted, or where their cases hadn't gone to verdict, they were simply dismissed. Now, we all knew pardons were forthcoming. I had hoped that there would be some common sense distinctions drawn amongst the criminals. Even J.D. Vance had said that there shouldn't be pardons for the violent. He won't be saying that today or tomorrow, or he'll be out of a job. Pam Bondi, the president's nominee for AG, felt similarly inclined, but said that each case had to be looked on its own merits. Again, she ain't going to be saying that to the president right about now. If I were king, I would, and if there were to be any clemency at all, I'd separate the criminals into categories in order of severity. One, those who simply milled about. That's at the lowest level. Those who destroyed property, moving up the list. Those who harassed or resisted cops, and especially those bastards who assaulted cops. Now, it didn't work out that way. Those who used force were pardoned. Some others, the so-called oath keepers and Proud Boys, had their sentences commuted. I'm sure they perceived their convictions as a badge of honor. Turns my stomach. More importantly, I'm concerned about the meaning and consequences of Trump's actions. For starters, I think pardoning violent criminals is an absolute miscarriage of justice. More than 150 police officers were injured during the assault on the Capitol by the pro-Trump mob. Some cops were hit on the head with baseball bats, flagpoles, pipes, and one cop went unconscious after a metal barrier was used to push her down. A retired New York police officer told a jury, he was one of the criminals, that he was acting in self-defense when he tackled a police officer and grabbed his gas mask during the January 6th riot. Jurors in that case deliberated for less than 3 hours before convicting that bastard. Now, Trump calls himself a law and order man. I don't see how you can say that. Are those words only used when it's convenient? Because the pardoning didn't follow that line of thinking, at least with respect to the violent criminals. And what outcome does this suggest about one's obligation to respect the police? Respect for the people who put their lives on the line every day so the rest of us can flourish. And this result, this pardoning parade, can only weaken that respect and probably reduce the number of folks who go into police work. I know an NYPD retired detective, solid Trumper. He's probably listening. I wonder how he feels about the pardons. If he has any self-respect, he's got to condemn them. But I wonder how he feels. Finally, what does the parade of pardons do? Does that parade of pardons encourage others to wait in the wings for the next call from Trump to help him in some respect, the next call to arms? I'm sickened by it all.
I can't disagree with that. And the thing is, Stu, it's not like they went through case by case and granted clemency or pardons for people who may have been over-prosecuted by an overzealous, politicized Biden Justice Department. Because I do feel, I'm not saying this of all of them, but I do feel Biden and his team wanted to make an example out of these people. They wanted to destroy them, and it was politicized by them because everything Biden did was politicized.
These people tried to overthrow the U.S. government.
Well, they weren't all that successful. And then another point of this, Stu, is, I don't agree with the pardon. I think it was not thought out. He was advised not to do it by...
Some of these people didn't want pardons.
Yeah, I know. No, he was advised not to do it by a lot of his team, and he just ignored it and did it because he's got this whole obsession. He called them hostages and the like.
God, yeah.
It's
He's not a will man.
No, he's not. And once again, you would think as a victor who has put his enemies in his place, he would behave in a more magnanimous way, but that's not.
And it would gain him more support.
Right. This is a mistake, and it's not going to help him, and it gives the Democrats one more opportunity to whine and bitch and moan about him, and they'll come off it. Although, let's face it, they don't have a lot of credibility on this. And the only thing I'm going to know, and I've noted this at the time when they were rioting the Capitol, the Democrats did nothing. A matter of fact, they never fully prosecuted all the rioters and looters from BLM. They stole from stores. They were violent. They burnt down a police office. We could go through all the infractions, and they still haven't stopped, right?
I agree.
And the Democrats were reluctant to prosecute him, and I don't think they've ever been held fully accountable. And what's funny about this, on the news the other day, one of the biggest charlatans of the civil rights movement, Al Sharpton, was claiming any company that gets rid of DEI, he's going to organize boycotts, because this is his whole
We've been through that before, where they held companies, corporations hostage. Jesse Jackson was good at that.
Right, they're shakedown artists.
Yeah.
And neither one, and they used the money for their own personal benefit. Jesse Jackson used it to pay for a mistress he impregnated. We know that story. So, it's like the problem is, Trump can get away with this more than he probably normally would because the Democrats are complete hypocrites and inconsistent. BLM protesters should have been put away. But anyway, Stu, that's not the only story of pardons that we have.
Yes.
Of course, the demented buffoon who, kind of strolled out of the White House with his pretend doctor of a wife, he was once again doing last-minute ridiculousness.
Well, I have a slightly different take on that, but I understand. Look, Trump and his aides have made repeated threats, and it goes on, to go after election workers, law enforcement officers, intelligence officials, and other adversaries of Trump. Trump continues to say his FBI nominee should go after media critics. Media critics, that's freedom of speech, isn't it? What does that say about his true interest in freedom of speech? Anyone, the truth is, simple truth, anyone who opposes him or disagrees with him becomes a target for legal and verbal abuse. Career over, certainly as a politician. It's frightening to watch in action, I feel. So I think it made sense for Biden to offer protection for members of the January 6th committee. All they did was search for truth, as far as I'm concerned, about an attack on our constitutional process. The truth about an attempt to overthrow a duly elected president and vice president. Adam Kinzinger, the Illinois Republican, said last year that Trump had suffocated the soul of the Republican Party. And I think for those who say we're a fan of Reagan and the like, I don't think that's an unfair comment. Liz Cheney, you might not like her, you might not like her sexual orientation or her political positions, but all she did, in my view, was to fight to bring out the truth. No crime there. Only respect is due, I believe, for being one of the few who has had and has the courage to stand up to Trump. That's a very short list of people. Now, the pardon of Hunter Biden, old Joe left a piece of scum get away there. An abuse of the pardon power. Lawful, but abusive. This whole thing makes me wonder about the tolerability, the acceptability of having a provision on pardons both sides.
I would agree. It needs to be eliminated. It's been abused.
With respect to the other family members, once again, I think that was unfortunate, but again, reasonable, given the venom and relentless vengefulness of Trump and the fact that Trump must be seething about the Hunter Biden outcome. And then the former head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, retired General Mark Milley, that guy had a long history, notwithstanding whatever Trump said about no combat, man has a long history of combat and leadership experience. He had, unfortunately, a continuing and substantial series of differences with Trump on a whole range of matters, and he became perceived as an obstacle and thereby a target. He and his family continue to get threatened. Their lives continue to be threatened. Trump's only experience, of course, with the military was in high school, military high school. He avoided military service because of supposed bone spurs. The podiatrist was a tenant of Trump's father in one of his father's buildings, and the diagnosis was given as a favor, I've read in several accounts, as a favor to gain access to the Father Fred's assistance with respect to eventual repairs in the rental unit of the podiatrist. Just consider for a moment, this is stunning, the potential impact of that one piece of deception, that giving him bone spurs, how that affected the course of American history. I expect, actually, that he would have gone somewhere else to get that decision if it wasn't coming from Trump's tenant. I wonder about two other pardons. I won't say anything more about them other than to say you guys listening can Google them and see what you think about those pardons. To people I'd never heard of.
Oh, well, you forgot to mention that he pardoned Dr. Fauci.
I wasn't going to mention that intentionally.
Well, I'm going to mention it.
Fair enough. I just think he has.
Because I'm sorry, I have to say, Stu, I don't agree with you on this issue. Biden abused the pardon power. He is a disgrace. If his family was innocent of crimes, as he claimed, they wouldn't need a pardon. And the bottom line is, I think they have been grifting off his name for years, starting off with that deadbeat son. And Biden himself has enriched himself very well. So I'm sorry, those pardons were unacceptable. And you can't be sanctimonious and act like you're a moral, protector of democracy when you pardon your entire family. Now, Dr. Fauci, I don't know if he committed a crime or not, but I know he is a liar. He covered up the fact that he funded gain-of-function research in China, which is now being eliminated, which may have been the source of the virus. We don't know for certain. We'll never know because we never had a full investigation as to the origins of COVID and our reaction to the pandemic and the way we acted. And Fauci led that effort, and it was a disaster. And he has admittedly lied about a number of the social distancing rules, including the mask requirement. That guy should never have been let off the hook. He also let off the hook, I think his name is Leonard Pelletier.
That's one of the two, yeah.
Right. He killed police officers. Was that? Two. And I don't care if he's 82 years old. You talk about how Trump letting off people who injured police. Well, Biden let off cop killers. He also let off child killers from the death penalty. That Biden left office with a stain on his record. It was never that great to begin with, and I'm sorry, those pardons are unacceptable. It doesn't excuse what Trump has done in abusing the pardon power, and he did it before in his first term, and I'm not sure where this is all going to lead, but, presidents have a limited window in which to act, in which to exercise their power, and Trump wasted political capital pardoning these people who disgraced themselves and the country, and it was an embarrassing spectacle. So I don't know what to say about it all, but I don't miss Joe Biden. He was a terrible president, did a terrible job. He lied to the American public. He should have left. He should have never run for another term, and he certainly didn't govern from the center.
Correct.
But enough of politics now, Stu. You were talking about the First Amendment and stifling First Amendment freedoms. Well, we're better. Do they stifle First Amendment freedoms that at some of our most prestigious universities? They seem to have a very inconsistent standard when it comes to applying free speech principles on their campuses, as we have noted when they allowed a bunch of anti-Semitic demonstrators to harass Jewish students over the Gaza issue. Now, at the University of Pennsylvania, which is at the hotbed of some of these issues, Professor Laurie Wax has sued she's a law professor. They're a tenured law professor, so tenured professors are protected generally from being fired. She is suing the university, and she is over their speech policies and claiming that Penn discriminated against her viewpoints while other faculty members were treated less severely, particularly those who are minority. Now, what exactly and she was ultimately disciplined by the university for the statements that she made. And I'll first say what the statement,
in front of Congress? Was this when they were?
No, that's in September of 2024, she was suspended for 1 year at half pay, removed from her named chair. She was a law professor, and they eliminated her summer pay permanently. Now, this was in a response to a number of public statements that she made that the university claimed were racist. And she has steadfastly denied that her comments were racist. Now, some of the stuff she said, if you ask me, was pretty harsh. Like, first of all, she said in 2017 that not all, she suggested that everyone wants to go to a country ruled by white Europeans because they're the exemplar of where we want to go, and not all countries are alike, and that created controversy. In a podcast interview, she claimed that she had never seen a black student at Penn Law School in the top 25% of the class, and she went on to note that the law review lets people on based on their minority status. She said I think it was 2029, our country will be better off with more white and fewer non-whites. She also said that the U.S. would be better off with fewer Asians and less Asian immigration.
My God.
And she went on to say that blacks and other non-Western groups harbor resentment against the stupendous achievements of the white, colonists or whatever you want to say. So she said some pretty controversial stuff. I mean, I don't think she may have hurt people's feelings by what she said. And what she said is kind of not nice. But she didn't harass anyone on their way to class the way the anti-Semitic demonstrators did. She didn't leave swastikas on the Hillel centers, as some of them did, or any of that stuff. And she just said stuff that was kind of hateful, right? Well, as you recall, Liz Magill, is the one who was the president of Penn at the times. They were disciplinary hearings, and she accepted the faculty recommendations on Wax's unprofessional conduct. That's what they called it. But she's a tenured professor, right? But it's kind of ironic because in December of 2023, on the 5th, Liz Magill testified before Congress along with Claudine Gray from Harvard, neither one of whom are employed anymore. And they were asked by Elise Stefanik, who is now going to be our UN ambassador, whether calling for the genocide of Jews is in violation of their speech code.
Yes.
And
I recall.
And they all said this.
Depends upon the circumstances.
Yes, if the speech turns into context, it is harassment, but it is a context-driven decision. Okay, so Laurie Wax said a bunch of hateful things, you'll say, but she didn't harass. She didn't harass anyone. She didn't take actions. There's no evidence of that. Yet, when it comes to anti-Semitism, Liz Magill waffled. Well, Liz lost her job like 4 days later because of the spectacle that she ensued.
Concern over how alumni would treat them financially.
Well, sure, a lot of alumni, many of whom were Jewish, will get rid of this or your donations are pulled. And of course, board of directors at universities, when the money talks, people walk, so to speak. But at the end of the day, Stu, this is another example of left-wing hypocrisy and how they seem to accept left-wing hate speech, but right-wing hate speech isn't good. The bottom line is the First Amendment, if we're going to apply First Amendment principles, the Supreme Court allowed the Nazis to march through Skokie, Illinois, because they had the right to do so, even though I was a Jewish community, many of whom were Holocaust survivors. That's the price we pay for living in a free society and having a First Amendment. Now, on the University of Pennsylvania campus and other these ridiculous.
The ACLU support that's.
Yes, they did. I support. And if you call someone fat, you use the wrong gender, you could be punished.
Yeah.
And if you're Amy Locke and you're a right-wing conservative who believes that this country should only be filled with white people, you will be penalized. But calling for the genocide of Jews doesn't mean a thing. I don't know what this says about our higher education system, but examples like this of these far left radicals is why today we have to put up with another 4 years of Donald Trump, because people had enough. They were willing to overlook his personal character flaws and his ridiculous behavior and his Hamburglar hat-wearing wife and that whole gross family, Ivanka and Jared, just seeing her with her plastic surgery face. They're so repulsive. I don't even know what to say about it.
Now Kushner's dad on his way to Paris.
An ambassador. I wonder if he'll record anyone else having sex with a prostitute and use it as a basis for blackmail. I mean, this is the kind of scum that is running our country. It's kind of an embarrassment.
It's almost as if you have to be a felon to be considered now for leadership.
Although
for the presidency.
On a happy note, Vivek Ramaswamy has already announced that he is leaving MAGA world and running for governor in Ohio.
Oh, yeah.
And if you read between the lines and read this article that I read in the New York Times, apparently Vivek, as you know, he ran for president, and what he did, he was extremely irritating, his personality. Yes. And apparently he also irritated Trump and Elon Musk. So I think he got pushed out already. So we've already had our first firing before we even started of one of I think Vivek is like 5'6", or not very tall. So he's even shorter than Marco Rubio. I won't miss him. I never liked him. I thought it was ridiculous. And his obnoxious personality, I don't really even know what he believes other than kissing Trump's ass to get a job.
But to stand in line there.
Apparently. Well, Stu, I think we're going to have a lot to talk about in the next coming weeks, don't you think?
I agree.
Well, on that note, we will conclude for the day.
Ta-da.